All right, we're on to our next passage here in Test 2, 33 through 42. This one is from Elizabeth Cady Stanton's address to the 1869 Women's Suffrage Convention in Washington, D.C. So we're talking about women's suffrage, and again, in 1869. The time frame is obviously important to get the context here. So let's go ahead and start these questions. Again, I'll start with 33, even though normally you would do this last. But it says, the central problem that Stanton describes in the passage is that women have been what? So central problem is about women. So really what they're saying about women throughout this passage, they do it a few different times, but they're really talking about how women need to have more power because man has kind of destroyed it. Some of the lines that kind of state that, like for example, line 15, the male element has held high carnival thus far. It has fairly run riot from the beginning. So that's one place you're going to see him mention that. But it's not the only place. Around line 60 through 61, somewhere in this realm here. So actually here. To exalt purity, virtue, morality, true religion, to lift man up into the higher realms of thought and action. We're talking about womanhood. So women need to kind of lift man up. We even had one of the questions that talked about how even men are kind of dumbfounded with like how bad things have gotten. So, this one it's really about those things, about women and really how man has destroyed it, and women need to lift them up. So with that being said, women have been denied equal educational opportunities, which has kept them from reaching their potential. They have been kept from reaching their potential, but it's not really focused on this denying educational opportunities. That's not really the big reason here. So that's not kind of the focus of the passage. So it's not going to be A. B, it says women have been prevented from exerting their positive influence on men, which that's kind of what they were saying, which has led to societal breakdown. We're kind of saying how men have kind of destroyed society and they need women to lift them up. So that seems to kind of match what was being stated here. C says women have been prevented from voting, which has resulted in poor candidates winning important elections. Again, this is not really a big focus about important elections in the passage. That's not really a big focus of this passage at all. So that's not going to be it. As a blocked, women have been blocked by men from serving as legislators, which has allowed the creation of unjust laws. Again, that's not the main idea of this passage. While this may be true, that doesn't mean it was mentioned in the passage, and especially one of the central problems mentioned in the passage, I should say. So the central problem, the thing that keeps coming up, is that men have really ruined society, and women are the ones that need to kind of lift men up. So this is going to be your best answer, that it really explains that concept. So that's going to be 33. 34, Stanton uses the phrase high carnival mainly to emphasize what she sees as what. So in this case, and again, if you're not sure, they're talking about utter domination, freewheeling spirit, scandalous decline, growing power. So we're wanting to see like this high carnival, how is it being used in line 15? And I kind of read this as a part of the other question earlier, but here we go. The male element has held high carnival thus far. It has fairly run riot from the beginning. So they're talking about, in this case, with the male element, it's just run roughshod. It's just had full power, can do whatever it's wanting to do. So again, when they use that phrase, they're trying to emphasize how men have just had full control over society. And then they kind of start to mention how it's kind of ruined society a little bit possibly as well. So here you read your answers. It's run utter domination of women by men. Again, they've run roughshod. They've been able to do what they want. So that does seem to match. So I would keep that. The freewheeling spirit, no. The scandalous decline, there was I guess they kind of mentioned afterwards there was decline, but not of moral values anyway, so it's not going to match regardless. The growing power of women, that's not how this is being used, more about how men have had full power, so it's not going to be D. So 34 is going to be A. 35, Stanton claims, and this is the evidence-based question, so Stanton claims that which of the following was a relatively recent historical development. So we're looking for relatively recent development. So we want to find the answer choices that would kind of say those things. So to kind of save us time, we'll look at that 15 through 22. This is recent, okay, a recent development. So the male element has held high carnival thus far. It has fairly run riot from the beginning, overpowering the feminine element everywhere, crushing out all the diviner qualities in human nature until we know but little of true manhood and womanhood. Of the latter, comparatively nothing, for it has scarce been recognized as a power until within, here we go, the last century. So right now, this passage, we're looking for something that mentions a recent development. So that is really where they're kind of saying this. Most of this evidence is stating men have been able to do whatever they want. That's all they've really done. And they've been crushing out all feminine elements everywhere. And then here at the very end it says it's scarce been recognized. So womanhood, talking about womanhood. For it has scarce been recognized as a power until within the last century. So women have been able to start to maybe gain some power recently. So that you have to find evidence that mentions something about recent developments. So that's going to be what B is stating right there. And again, you check all your evidence and you're looking for that information. From here, you want to find the answer choice that kind of fits that. So is it the control of society by men? Is that a recent development? No, that's not a recent development. That's how things have been. Is it the spread of war and injustice? That's not a recent development. There's been wars for all time. The domination of domestic life by men? That is not a recent development. That's the way it was already. The acknowledgement of women's true character? That's a recent development. So that's the one that kind of matches with number 36 for your evidence. So that's 35 and 36. 37, rule most nearly refers to. So we want to see what rule means. So we'll kind of go check line 24 and see what it's saying. So here we go. Society, I'm reading right here. Society is but the reflection of man himself, untempered by woman's thought. The hard iron rule. So it's almost like a law, like this is the way things are. Like you're putting your foot down saying this is the way things will be. We feel like in the church, the state, and at home. So again, society reflection of man with no women at all allowed, and that is like steadfast. It will not change. That's kind of the way that word's trying to be used. So it's a very strong rule. So is it a general guideline? No, it's very strong. Controlling force, those seem to be some strong words that seem to match what they're trying to say here. An established habit, it is established, it's not a habit, it's a rule, it's strong. Procedural method isn't really strong enough for what they're trying to say here, so B is going to be your best answer for number 37. 38, it can reasonably be inferred that the strong-minded was a term generally intended to. So again, it's an inference question. So this was the strong-minded is a term intended to what? So what does that intend to do? So let's go ahead and read those line 32. See what it says here. People object to the demands of those whom they choose to call the strong-minded, because they say the right of suffrage will make the women masculine. So that term, strong-minded, it really comes across as a negative term. So, people object to the demands of those whom they choose to call the strong-minded. So this is a negative thing because they say the right of suffrage will make the women masculine. So this is going to be, again, a negative term. So it's a term generally intended to. I'm looking for something negative. So is it a term generally intended to praise women? No. Identify women, not negative. Criticize, condemn. These are two words that are negative, so now we want to read these. Is it used to criticize women who enter the male-dominated professions, or is it condemn women who agitate for the vote for their sex? And when you read these, you'll notice they say the right of suffrage will make them masculine. This is just the difficulty in which we are involved today. They're talking about here, I'm trying to find the words at the end, but they're talking about them gaining power, earning votes. I mean, they don't say the word vote, but they say the right of suffrage. So that right is the right to vote. So this is more related to voting in politics as opposed to entering. Nothing there really talks about entering male-dominated professions. So this one is mentioning your rights, your general rights, whereas this one for C, they're just talking about professions. So D is going to be a better answer because they don't mention professions really for 38. So 39, best most nearly means. So let's go to line 36, see what best means in context. Though disenfranchised, we have few women. We have few women in the best sense. So what does that mean? Well, let's keep reading. We have simply so many reflections, varieties, and dilutions of the masculine gender. The strong natural characteristics of womanhood. So the strong natural womanhood are repressed and ignored. Independence. For so long as man feeds woman, she will try to please the giver and adapt herself to his condition. So it seems like the way they're talking about women here is that you don't really, they have few women that are true women with true women characteristics, womanly characteristics. They've been kind of diluted into the masculine gender just to try to please the men. So I would say here the truest sense of a woman. So we're looking at superior, no. Excellent, no. Genuine, like a genuine sense, like the true sense, probably. Rarest, not necessarily. Just because there's few of them, that's not the way that was being represented with the word best. So 39 is going to be C. 40 says Stanton contends that the situation she describes in the passage has become so dire that even men have begun to what? Now this one is an evidence-based question, so we're going to look at our evidence and see which one mentions that a situation so bad that even men have said things. So you look for evidence that talks about that situation. It's so bad that even men have begun to what? So if you go through the evidence, 53 through 55 is the one that's going to give it to you. So when you read these lines, you'll see, and now man himself stands appalled at the results of his own excesses. So they stand appalled and mourns in bitterness that falsehood, selfishness, and violence are the law of life. So there's your evidence right there. Okay, and again, the question says in the passage has become, the situation has become so dire that even men have become to what? So it's so bad that they really are kind of appalled at the results and mourn in bitterness. So I'm saying like they're mourning what they've done. So you want to find evidence that, again, does that. So our answer for the evidence is going to be B. You have to check each one. But we're trying to see where they're kind of mourning what they've done. Do they lament the problems that they've created? That seems to be mourning what they've done. So I'd keep that. Do they join the call for women's suffrage? No. Do they consider women their social equals? I don't know if they're going to go that far. Do they ask women how to improve civic life? There's nothing there saying they would do that. They just are mourning what they've done. So 40 is going to be A. That's what matches that one. And that's going to also be 40 and 41. And then lastly, 42 says the sixth paragraph, so lines 67 through 78, is primarily concerned with establishing a contrast between what? So this sixth paragraph, we're trying to get a contrast here between two things. So as you read this paragraph, let's get that contrast. So in speaking of the masculine element, so they're talking about masculine element in this paragraph, I do not wish to be understood to say that all men are hard, selfish, and brutal. For many of the most beautiful spirits the world has known have been, so I'll say beautiful spirits have been clothed with manhood. So it seems like they're talking about masculine elements. They're saying that, like, not all men are just, selfish and brutal. There are actually some men are good. But I prefer to those characteristics, though often marked in woman, that distinguish what is called the stronger sex. For example, the love of acquisition and conquest, the very pioneers of civilization, when expended on the earth, the sea, the elements, the riches and forces of nature, are powers of destruction when used to subjugate one man to another or to sacrifice nations to ambitions. This really wasn't talking about much masculine element, just more about, what they've been able to do. So I'm looking here, this paragraph's about masculine element and what makes up the masculine element, good and bad. So you just kind of read that and see what it's really talking about, and that's what this question's asking you anyway. It's a contrast between men and women, maybe. More, I'm trying to get like the masculine element, not just general men and women, but I would keep that. Is it established a contrast between the spiritual world and the material world? No. The bad men and good men, again, same thing. They're talking about men here, but it's more about the masculine elements. So men and masculine traits, this is what I was looking for. Okay, so this is what your answer is going to be for 42.